What is up, guys? Well, we are just over the halfway hump of 2025, and like a lot of other people that did it last week, it's time to finally talk about the best and the worst movies of 2025 so far. I wanted to hold off one more week to see if Superman, James Gunn's film, was going to crack my top 5. Spoiler alert, it will not be on this list. It was just narrowly edged out by the 5 that I am going to talk about, which, for as much as I enjoyed Superman, that shows you how much I really enjoy the best films of the year so far. So let me know all of your thoughts down below. Which movies have you loved in 2025 thus far? Which ones have you hated? Which ones are you most looking forward to that you think are going to steal the crown away by the end of this year? And with all that being said, we'll get the trash out of the way first and kick off the top 5 worst films of 2025 thus far. And coming in at number 5 for me is going to be a film called Fear Street Prom Queen. And this is not only one of the worst films I've seen this year, it's also one of the most disappointing films that I've seen this year, because the Fear Street trilogy that came out back in like 2021, 2020 was actually a pretty cool little trilogy. It was something that actually excited me for having some new, very R-rated horror series that kind of plays on some of those R.L. Stine sensibilities that I grew up with in a more adult way. And I was looking forward to seeing more and more chapters in this world. And it's been a long-ass wait to finally get a 4th one. And when we finally do get one, it's this 80s prom queen slasher that to me is one of the most generic horror films I've seen in a very long time, which is sad because a lot of horror films are pretty generic. This one just goes for every single cliche, every single overused trope. There is absolutely no surprises whatsoever in the story as far as the identity or the motivations of the killers. It's actually comically obvious from the beginning of the film. The kills aren't anything to write home about, which even that in and of itself could have saved this movie quite a bit. Us horror fans, we can forgive a lot if you give us some really cool and gnarly gore. This film has like one kill that's mildly amusing. The rest of it is all just wash, rinse, repeat, just a stab, a little hand with a cleaver comes down or something like that. Absolutely nothing about this movie stood out to me. Even the soundtrack, like I love 80s nostalgia, although I'm getting very burnt out on 80s nostalgia. But what I don't care for is when you have a movie that takes place in the 80s that only acknowledges the hits of the 80s that we still listen to today. Like there was a lot more music being played back then than Betty Davis Eyes and White Wedding. So yeah, massive disappointment. I don't think very many people like this one, so I don't even know if we're going to get more Fear Street movies. We'll see. It's kind of par for the course that Netflix lets me down at this point. But yeah, my number 5 worst of the year so far, Fear Street Prom Queen. Coming in at number 4 is a movie that most of you probably haven't even watched or heard of, and there's a reason for that, and it's called Borderline. Now, I am an absolute subscriber to the Samara Weaving fan club. I think that she can do no wrong, except for this film. So in this movie, Samara Weaving plays this very popular pop star. She has this psycho stalker played by Ray Nicholson, who's kind of a bit of an up-and-comer, especially this year thus far, and essentially, it's a movie where he gets a hold of her after he gets out of the asylum, wherever he's at, and takes her hostage inside of her house. And he has like this psychotic fantasy that they're already married, and he's trying to visualize all of this by, forcing her to play along, essentially. There's a lot of potential in there for not only some good thrills, but some good dark comedy, maybe even some really tense sequences of chases or escapes. And this movie just has nothing. Like, the comedy is off. Ray Nicholson's given it his all to try to just be scenery chewing and maniacal, and I think he does a pretty good job, but I don't know. There's the mix that they go for in this film is just not very entertaining. Even Samara Weaving, she doesn't really get much of a chance to shine. So I don't blame this film on the 2 stars here that I'm a big fan of. I think it's just a poorly written film. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Samara Weaving's husband either wrote or directed or both possibly. So I hope this is not going to turn into one of those Melissa McCarthy situations where she does a lot of really good stuff, and every time she works with her husband, we go, oh God, here we go again. Coming in at number 3, oh, how the mighty have fallen with Flight Risk. Now, this was a movie where the writing was kind of on the wall, where you have this very goofy January release with Mark Wahlberg with, for some reason, a shaved head, playing this scenery-chewing pilot who's tied off in the back while Topher Grace is trying to survive and get to the witness protection program. Like, it feels like some goofy little 90s movie that you would rent from Blockbuster or something like that. But the only thing that gave me pause is that this is a Mel Gibson film. And say what you will about the man as a person, Mel Gibson as a filmmaker is one of the titans of Hollywood. Every single movie that he has made has been very, very well received. Many of them either getting nominated for or winning Oscars. And even as an actor, I just love what Mel Gibson brings. So the fact that he was doing this movie that is so not the type of film he typically makes, he likes to make historic films, these epics, these big, 3-hour dramas. Him doing this weird, 90s thriller throwback, it just felt so wrong that I could not have been more interested in checking out what the fuck this thing was going to be. And it was an absolute train wreck. From the beginning, you have awful CGI. Mark Wahlberg, I'm actually a fan and defender of him. I think he's really fun when he's given the right material. I don't know what he's doing here. His performance and what he has going on doesn't really even match what's going on with the two protagonists. And the twists and turns it tries to attempt, again, just like with Prom Queen, incredibly predictable, not very interesting, not compelling at all. So it's a movie that was just an absolute train wreck. And I don't know, I guess Mel Gibson had some bills to pay. I would love to sit down and have a conversation with him and go, so why Flight Risk? What's going on here? Coming in at number 2 is a movie that's probably going to shock some people, is not number 1, and that is The Woman in the Yard. This is the movie so far this year that has given me the most negative, angry emotions that I've walked out of the theater with. But there's one movie that I dislike just a little bit more. So The Woman in the Yard is one of the latest Blumhouse releases, and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't, you could assume some things from the title and the poster, but I just went to go check this thing out of curiosity. And the initial setup of it, while seeming very much like it's better suited for a horror short, is very intriguing, where you have this grieving mother with these 2 children who are in this house that, for external reasons, they don't have any power, any communication going on. And this very sinister looking woman in a black veil just appears sitting in front of their house, staring at them. And as the day goes on, she gets a little bit closer to the house. There's something inherently creepy about that. If you've ever had somebody weird outside of your window in front of your house, and even if they're looking in your direction, the dread feeling that can bring. And they're often not dressed as fucked up as this woman in the yard is. And unfortunately, as the movie goes on, not only is it just very slow and not very interesting, despite some suitable performances going on, it ends up being another movie that's some kind of a manifestation of grief. And it's for Christ's sake, can we get out of this grief horror era that we're in? There was a point back in the 2000s where all of us collectively as horror fans were like, enough of the found footage. We get it. It's fucking cheap to make. You guys are starting to suck at it. That's kind of where I feel like we're at as a fan base with the grief horror stuff. It's Jesus Christ, can we talk about anything else in a horror film? So if this same exact story was told maybe 5 years ago, would it have landed a little better? Possibly, but it just seems very overdone and cliche at this point to try to explore grief yet again in a new way. And ultimately, what soured me on the movie even more than just being kind of bored and underwhelmed with it is the direction it goes in the last 10 or 15 minutes, which I won't spoil it in case you want to watch the film. I spoiled the shit out of it with a couple different videos because I was just so frustrated by it, is that ultimately this film ends up being about a character who wants to take their own life. And that is ultimately what we're exploring here. And I understand, I've heard some people say that it's a very realistic expression of that and the type of thoughts that people that have those desires will say to themselves to justify what they want to do. Totally fair. I have never once in my life had the desire to even head down that road, so I am absolutely speaking on a little bit of ignorance there, but it's just incredibly unpleasant to watch. And the note that it ultimately ends on, and the way that I interpret the film and many other people interpret the film, it's just so gross, and it leaves you feeling miserable, and you walk away going, what is the ultimate message of this film? I don't understand at all what the point was here. You just made my day worse. And if you make my day worse and not in a way that's compelling or thought-provoking, I don't like your fucking movie. Added in with the fact that it just tries to have its cake and eat it too. It tries to leave some open interpretation, like maybe it's a happy ending, when all of the evidence, if you pay attention for the rules of this movie, absolutely points to this being a downer ending. So it just feels like an absolute cop-out to hear that from the screenwriter. Oh, I see it as hopeful. Well, I sure as fuck don't, and I was paying attention. At the end of the day, another one of those just very quick, cheap produced Blumhouse films that had a little bit of potential there, but just could not realize that potential. And if you want to explore such a dark theme, I think you have to have a certain amount of care with how responsible you are in expressing that, and I just did not feel like we had that here. It was just a miserable story. But speaking of misery, my number one worst film of the year so far is Kinda Pregnant. This is one of the Amy Schumer, Happy Madison produced comedies that went straight to Netflix that I knew I wasn't going to like, but at the beginning of the year, you're kind of light on material to talk about, so I gave it a whirl, and it was exactly what I feared it was going to be. Absolute low-hanging fruit garbage comedy that I am so over being the majority of the comedy that we get nowadays. Comedy as a film genre feels like it's just fucking dead. You get some good comedy when it's sprinkled into other genres, but as far as just classic comedies, a movie that is only aiming to make you laugh, I don't know if I've seen a great one in 10 years, maybe even more than that. So that is going to color a lot of my response to this film, is just being absolutely exhausted with these types of movies being all we get. But even if this was given to me in the golden age of comedy, it's just a bad movie. Like, you have an entire premise here that had potential to maybe be funny if you had anybody other than Amy Schumer in the lead actor role. Now, I don't hate Amy Schumer by any means, but I have never once found her funny, whether it's stand-up or in a movie role. So I really don't understand why she continues to get work, because I've never heard anybody say anything other than what I just said. Who's the Amy Schumer fans out here? But you have a woman that is so fixated on getting all of the mom-to-be treatment, where people let you sit down, they open the door for you, they tell you you're glowing, and they shower you with compliments and buy you gifts, that she fakes a pregnancy, which in and of itself is a pretty despicable thing to do, but it at least sets up some kind of an arc for a character to learn and develop and become a good person by the end. And they absolutely botch that side of things. She is paired up with a guy here to be her romantic interest, who believes that she is a mom-to-be the entire time that they are having their little meet cute and multiple dates or whatever. So literally their entire relationship is based on a bunch of lies, a pretty disgusting lie at that. She's not a good or even an entertaining person to be around, doesn't have any redeeming qualities that we are shown in the movie. And yet by the end, they try to do the romantic comedy thing where it's like, yeah, I know she fucked up, but she realizes she fucked up, so give her another chance and we'll all live happily ever after. Fuck that! She's horrible! Run your ass away the opposite direction that she is right now. So on a story level, it doesn't work. It's annoying. It's frustrating. The lead actress is annoying and frustrating and not entertaining whatsoever. The style of comedy that we're getting here is such just trash humor with no effort put into it whatsoever, where like somebody's drinking a glass of milk and it ends up being cum. Like, it's something like that. And it's, I'm just done. I just hope that sometime soon, as a society, or really more so the movie studios, can recognize that like tensions within social justice stuff is not as high as you think it is. Like, don't be afraid to be funny anymore. Comedy's supposed to challenge you. Comedy is supposed to somewhat offend you on some level. That's why oftentimes we don't say it out loud, and when somebody does, you get a guttural reaction out of it, because your comedy brings the unspoken to the surface. Like, let's get back to doing that, please, for the love of God. No more of this bullshit. And now we've got all of that out of the way, let's talk about the great movies of the year so far. And I do want to give a couple of honorable mentions, because I feel like my top 5 is amazing, but the ones that are just outside of it are also ones that I have highly enjoyed. So, of course, James Gunn's Superman, as I've already shouted out, highly enjoyed that movie. It is my favorite comic book movie of the year so far. Very well might be by the end of the calendar year. The Accountant 2 was such a fun sequel. I loved seeing that at South by Southwest. It was a big tonal shift, more into the buddy comedy route, but I actually really enjoyed that. The chemistry between Ben Affleck and John Bernthal was great. Can't wait for The Accountant 3. Hopefully we don't have to wait quite as long for that one. And Dangerous Animals, that was a big surprise for me. A movie that kind of came out of nowhere. I'm not really a shark movie guy outside of Jaws and Deep Blue Sea. And this one, certainly more of a serial killer movie than a shark movie, but I think both subgenres apply here, and I just had a lot of fun with this one. Jai Courtney was great. I really enjoyed the twist on his serial killer MO, and it was a fun one, so I look forward to checking out all of those again very soon. But coming in at number 5 for me as of right now is going to be F1, the movie. To me, this is the movie of the summer so far, and it's exactly what I go to the movies for in the summertime. Just good old-fashioned balls-to-the-wall entertainment. This is the same creative team for the most part that brought us Top Gun Maverick, and a lot of the things that a lot of us loved about Top Gun Maverick is carried over here, where you just get that good old-fashioned blockbuster filmmaking. You get a likable lead by a movie star that most of us really enjoy. You have very fun characters with fun character dynamics. You have amazing action sequences in here, racing sequences. It's all shot very well. You get a Hans Zimmer score that is one of my favorite scores that he's done in a very long time. And even though it leans very much on some of the cliches and the tropes of sports movies, I think it does it in a way that's actually kind of nostalgic. It's not in a way that you roll your eyes like I do with Woman in the Yard, where it's like, fuck, another grief movie. You look at some of the things here, like having the underdog, having the two lead characters kind of be these rivals, even though they're both kind of right for the ways that they look at each other, having a romance thrown in there that you don't necessarily need in the movie, but done in a way where it's just another piece of your main characters that you just kind of enjoy watching how things turn out. And even the way that, you have an injury in the movie and somebody's got to come back from the injury. Like, it's all tried and true sports movie stuff, but I enjoyed the way that they built it to have this film. So if you really like Top Gun Maverick, especially if you like F1 or racing, definitely watch this one in theaters on the biggest screen that you can, because of all the summer movies we've gotten so far, this is the one that I would say is worth your time and money. Coming in at number 4, we got one hanging on from all the way back in January, and that is Companion. I really, really enjoyed this film. Now, this is a movie that very easily could have been spoiled for you, so I understand a number of people not liking it as much as me. I was able to walk in pretty blind and avoid any trailers or anything that was out there. Despite the marketing's attempt to give away the big twist, it was a nice little surprise for me. So having a film like this where you have two very fun movie stars here, where you got Jack Quaid, who's becoming one of my favorite little up-and-coming actors, and then also Sophie Thatcher, one of my favorite up-and-coming actors as well, playing off of him. And the different blends of sci-fi and horror we get here, and the way that they are talking about like very toxic relationships in a way that's very new and brings kind of a fun spin to that, and gives you a character that eventually you kind of love to hate and see him get his comeuppance. And you have a lot of interesting twists and turns along the way too that makes for a very fun experience for a first-time watch especially. So a movie that I just had an absolute blast with. I think that it was no holds barred with some of the things it was going for. You get a little bit of that gore in there. You get some nice surprises in the story. If it all works out, you can't ask for a whole lot more from a movie like this. So Companion, one of my favorites of the year so far still. Coming at number 3 is one of my favorite films from South by Southwest, and you'll be able to check it out here in the next couple of weeks, and that is Together. Now, there was a little bit of drama going on with this movie that, there's still a little bit of a question mark there on whether or not this movie was plagiarized from another film that was released a couple of years ago. The director and writer seems to have put that to bed in a way that I'm satisfied until I hear more. But with that being thrown aside, this is a movie that, much like Companion, is dealing with kind of a toxic codependent relationship, much more the codependent side. And it just visualizes that with this horror concept that is an absolute wild body horror film. And this is another one I don't really want to tell you too much about. And luckily the marketing, at least the earlier marketing especially, has done a pretty decent job at not giving away a lot of what this movie is about. But you have Dave Franco and Allison Brie here, who are real life husband and wife, and they have great chemistry on screen. And they're a bit of a codependent relationship where eventually they buy this house out in the country, and they come across something that puts that codependency to quite a literal experience that they have to fight against for the rest of the film. And you have two very fun performances from them. There's a lot of really good laugh out loud comedy in here. There's also some very fucked up gnarly visuals in here, so it's a movie that kind of covers all bases in that regard. I think there's some nice little twists and turns in here that aren't necessarily as shocking or surprising as Companion, but are still executed in a way where even if you see it coming to a certain extent, it's still fun to see it play out. And it's just not afraid to go certain places with the concept that it's going for. So I like a movie that has balls in that regard. And I just had an absolute blast with this one. This was one of the first films I saw at South by Southwest, and it hung on to be my second favorite film of that entire festival. Coming in at number 2, a movie that is going to be most people's number 1, it looks like, by the end of the year, and that is Ryan Coogler's Sinners. Now, this is a film that I think is so dense with ideas, both narratively, thematically, and visually, that it's only going to get better the more that I watch it and the more that I sit on it. I have still only seen it once. I'm looking forward to checking it out again. So this might even end up being my number 1 by the end of the year. But what I like about it is that on its surface, this was just kind of marketed as Ryan Coogler's period piece vampire film. And that's certainly an accurate representation of the movie, but it's so much more than that. There is so much more going on here with the main characters, both played by Michael B. Jordan. There's so much more being discussed here with some of the very horrific events and the horrific climate of that period, that time period that they're going at here. A really profound way to explore and discuss racism and, cultural appropriation in a way that is very much not what people would automatically call woke. We have a lot of movies nowadays that go for some of these themes that are very, social, important themes, but they can feel a little heavy-handed. They can feel like it's getting injected into maybe way too many movies nowadays. Certain argument for that I can understand. This is a movie that feels like, no, let's do it in an intelligent way. Let's do it in a way where we use vampirism as a metaphor in a way that it's never been used before. Let's have a real discussion in a movie that has so many other things going on, where this doesn't become the ultimate focus of the film, but it is a very major piece of what we want you to take away from it. And I think we need more movies like that. So just aside from that, beautifully shot, the way that Ryan Coogler utilizes the IMAX format. You hear this guy talk about aspect ratios and the way that certain directors have used certain things and how he tries to take a little bit of that and spin it into his own filmmaking style. He's fascinating to listen to. Like, of all the filmmakers who have really risen to prominence over the last 10, 15 years, he's the one that I would most want to have like just a nerdy conversation with, because I just love hearing the guy talk about film. Amazing performances all the way throughout. As I said, Michael B. Jordan doing double duty here, and the special effects work and how they make him a twin and like pass a cigarette to himself is pretty incredible. And the vampire side of things, I think, was done pretty well. Now, as a vampire whore, admittedly, I could have used more of that element of the film. I could have used a little bit more vampire carnage, a little bit more vampire lore. But I do think the amount that we get here is used appropriately, especially when it's used mostly as a metaphor. And for even a film that's very dense and a pretty significant runtime, it continues to go on to this post-credit sequence that is really like the true ending, the epilogue of the film. So this is a movie that on its surface could seem like a very dispensable, just genre movie, but it's brought to you by this filmmaker that's just doing things on another level. And so it really ends up becoming one of the greats of this genre, and will continue to be one of those films that, 10, 15, 20 years from now, we talk about when we say, what are the best vampire movies of all time? What are the ones that are most important? What's the one that you remember seeing in theaters that just knocked you on your ass? That's Sinners. But easily coming in at number 1 for me is a film that I saw at South by Southwest that has not been picked up for distribution yet. So most likely all of you guys are going to be seeing it in 2026, and that's when it's going to be more prominent in the conversation. But I've seen it in 2025. This is when my thoughts are most fresh on it. So I'm talking about it now. And that is The Rivals of Amaziah King. This is maybe one of the most indifferent movies that I walked into at South by Southwest, where I knew nothing about it other than Matthew McConaughey was the star, and it kind of looked like maybe a period piece film. But nothing about the description or anything I had heard about it really intrigued me at all. I could have very easily had passed on this film. So I really just sat down to watch it because it was the big movie premiere that night, and what the fuck else am I going to do, right? And I was quite literally blown away. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not the type of person that tries to create these huge hyperbolic statements. This movie is quite literally one of those movies for me that reminds me why I love film, that reminds me why I love storytelling, that like almost renews my faith in movies, in the movie industry. Like, it's such a special movie that you're only going to get maybe once or twice a generation, that I just did not expect at all what I walked into. Now, it's a very hard movie to describe, because essentially what it is kind of a crime thriller with a bit of a musical edge to it, about Matthew McConaughey as a beekeeper. And eventually one of his rivals, played by Kurt Russell, comes in and quite literally threatens his beekeeping business. And even the way that I just described it there, it feels like I'm not describing the movie correctly. Like, they're going to have a nightmare marketing this thing, and I hope to God they find a way to do it, because I think everybody really needs to check this thing out. But it's a movie where Matthew McConaughey came out to introduce it, and he just kind of said, hey, this is the first script that I've read in a while where it felt human. Like, I felt like I was reading characters that I would recognize, that I know that person, I have met that person, and there's just such a heart and a soul to it. There's such an earnestness to the storytelling, to the characters here. And when I say it's got a musical edge, it's not a musical, but they also have like this little bluegrass band that literally intros the movie, and they have multiple little music sequences where they're, you know, playing inside of a house or something. So it's very similar to like Rudderless in that way, where I would not call Rudderless a musical, but music is a huge piece of the cinematic language of that movie. Very much the same here. And what I loved about this movie is that it just has so many different things that it hits on. It had one of the goriest sequences I saw at South by Southwest, and it's not even close to being what I would say is a horror film. It had the biggest laughs of the festival. It had some of the best character work going on. The music was incredible, and I'm not even really a big bluegrass guy, just like with Rudderless, where I'm not really big into that style of music, but somehow the way that it's used in the movie, it hits me on a different level. And there were so many points in the movie where they would do something in the story that feels like, oh my God, you just ruined the movie. Like, everything that I was interested in has now changed or has left the film, and I don't know if you're going to recover from that. And then they would recover from it, and where they went was just as compelling as where you expected them to go, that they did not go that direction. There's like a heist in the middle of the film. There's so much stuff in this that it's unlike anything I've ever seen, honestly. So I hope that you guys get to see this sooner or later. I made a point to actually walk up to Cole Sprouse at Monsterpalooza because I wanted to ask him, like, hey, you heard anything about if it got distributed yet, or if it's got bought, or what's going on? And he didn't really have an answer for me. So I hope it's not going to be one of those movies that I have to wait on pins and needles for a couple of years for you guys to check out. But as of right now, for as many great movies are in my top 5, and I hope are even more great movies to be the rest of 2025, I don't know if anything's going to top The Rivals of Amaziah King for me. That movie is just so special in a way that I very, very rarely experience at the movie theater. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews so far. I'm also going to put my ranking of all the films I saw at South by Southwest, since I talked about 2 of them here. You can check out the other 23 that I watched in this video. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.